I have to say, Dan, it is absolutely electrifying. Let me tell you where we are. We're right outside the Istana, the gates to the Istana, which is the palace that the Singapore Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong, uses to welcome visiting dignitaries. And right there now, Donald Trump is having lunch with the Singaporean Prime Minister. Yesterday, shortly after he arrived in Singapore, Kim Jong-un was also travelled to the Istana for a meeting with the Singaporean Prime Minister. Both sides now engaged in last-minute preparations for the summit meeting that will be taking place on Tuesday morning here in Singapore. Just under 24 hours from now, they'll be meeting on a secluded island resort called Sentosa, just to the south of where we are here outside the Istana. And the eyes of the world are going to be on this meeting. It has been simply astonishing to be here over the last 24 hours to witness yesterday Kim Jong-un's motorcade making its way through the streets of Singapore and heading to his meeting with the Singaporean Prime Minister. Now Donald Trump having his bilateral meeting with the Singaporean Prime Minister. Both men otherwise have been holed up in respective hotels here in the city, hotels that are so close to one another that if they wanted to, they could leave their hotel rooms and meet at a coffee shop in the middle, somewhere between the two hotels. They, of course, are not doing that. Like prize fighters gearing up for a world heavyweight bout, they are surrounded by their advisors who are prepping them and trying to get them ready for what will be, by any measure, an historic encounter. The first time an American president has agreed to meet the leader of North Korea, the most reclusive communist state on the planet, with stakes very, very high. The President of the United States wanting North Korea to agree to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. It's far from clear that the North Koreans are ready yet to agree to that. Let's see where this meeting gets everybody tomorrow.
And of course, there's that big issue of the Korean Peninsula peace agreement, which is linked to these talks as well, Simon.
Yeah, so, I mean, in as much as they may make progress tomorrow, there are a couple of issues where we may see progress being immediately made. There is hope here that they will prod things towards some kind of formal peace agreement to mark the end of the Korean War. The Korean War on paper is still officially underway because it never concluded with a peace agreement, only with an armistice. The United States also may be willing to indicate that it is ready to start talking about establishing some kind of diplomatic relationship with North Korea that may ultimately lead to the opening of a US embassy in Pyongyang. That would obviously, if and when it happened, be a seismic development in the relationship between Washington, D.C. and Pyongyang. But, you know, there are officials back in Washington, foreign policy elites, both Republicans and Democrats, who really worry about President Trump's decision to go ahead with this meeting. We didn't know it was going to happen 5 weeks ago. Preparations inevitably have been somewhat rushed. There hasn't been the usual choreography, the usual deliberation that you would expect before this kind of an event, because there simply hasn't been time for it. And what many observers back in Washington worry is that simply by having the meeting, President Trump is bestowing on Kim Jong-un a legitimacy that all President Trump's predecessors in the White House have not been willing to bestow on the North Korean government. So let's see what Kim Jong-un is willing to give up during the course of these talks, because certainly simply by having the meeting, President Trump has already given up quite a lot.
Okay, now, Simon, the US president himself has said that if things are not going well in this meeting tomorrow, he's going to walk out of the meeting. Very briefly, what is it that Trump will be looking for to decide whether or not things are going well or not in the summit tomorrow, and then walk out if they're not going well?
Well, you know Donald Trump, Dan, everything is different with Donald Trump. He's a maverick, and before he left that highly contentious G7 summit meeting in Canada over the weekend, he said within the first minute of meeting Kim Jong-un, within 60 seconds, he will know if the North Koreans are serious about advancing the cause of peace. And he was asked by a reporter, how will you know within the first minute? To which Donald Trump said, touch and feel. That's what I do. So let's see if they get to the second minute of the meeting when they get together tomorrow.